Welcome to Emerging Franchise Brands, the podcast that introduces you to the visionary founders of America's fastest growing franchise opportunities. We'll also hear from industry pros as they share insights on what it really takes to achieve the elusive milestone of 100 plus locations. I am your host, Frank Fiume, founder of I9 Sports, and my 20-year journey from inception to acquisition has given me a unique perspective on how to succeed in franchising. Join me as we welcome today's guest. Before I start today's show, I have exciting news for founders, CEOs, and franchise brand presidents. Join me January 14th through the 16th, 2025 in Tampa for the first ever Emerging Franchise Brands live event, an exclusive opportunity designed just for you. It's my blueprint for success at every stage of franchising, one I wish I'd had, packed with real-world solutions and strategies to solve your challenges today and prepare for those you'll face tomorrow. Space is limited, so head over to emergingfranchisebrands.com to secure your spot today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. On today's show, I have the CEO and founder of Blo Blow Dry Bar and Lashkind, Vanessa Yakobson. Vanessa, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Nice to have you. So, Vanessa, you've got quite the expertise in franchising. Why don't you give us, though, a background a little bit on Blo Blow Dry Bar, and then we'll get into Lashkind and what you've done with creating this platform.
Sure, thank you. So first of all, I want to say that I'm not the founder of Blo Blow Dry Bar. I have to give credit to two women from Vancouver who started the company, but I'm a founder in our company. So prior to acquiring Blo Blow Dry Bar, we had a children's hair salon concept in the Canadian market, combination of corporate locations and franchise locations. In 2009, we discovered Blo. It had 3 locations in Vancouver, Canada, and it was 2 years old at the time. We acquired it, turned it into a franchise system, moved the head office to Toronto, and then a few years later, we sold the children's hair salon concept so that we could really focus on growing Blo. And then I joined our team shortly thereafter. And now you're right. Now we have a well-established system with Blo Blow Dry Bar. We realized that we had finally figured it out. We knew how to help support franchisees in their growth, build out a robust system of support at the corporate office. And we knew we could bring that to the benefit of emerging brands. So we started to look for brands in the beauty or wellness space. The thinking was, if they had a similar franchisee profile, similar customer profile, similar staff working at the location to Blo, then we had a lot of expertise to lend. So we ended up acquiring, just over 2 years ago now, a business here in the Toronto market where our head office remains. It was a company that was in the lash and brow styling space called Mink, MYNC. 4 corporate locations and 2 pop-ups. So the 4 corporate locations were turned into a franchise system. And then we entered the US with the brand name Lashkind. So we actually had a couple of Blo Blow Dry Bar owners who opened Lashkind locations. And then subsequent to that, we acquired a company out of San Diego, a small franchise chain, an emerging franchisor called Lash Bar. So indeed, we are now growing out a platform, and we are still on the lookout for emerging franchisors in the beauty and wellness space to bring into our mix.
Wow, quite the story. So bringing it all the way back, though, you had opened and operated successful children's hair salons first, right?
Correct.
This is how you got started. What prompted you to decide to become a franchisor after being a franchisee for how long?
Well, so the original story with the children's hair salon concept was when my husband and I took our oldest son for his first haircut in Toronto to a place that was supposed to be the best place to get your kid's haircut. And my husband looked around and he said, "This is awful. We can do a much better job." And the next thing I knew, he came home and said, "Okay, I'm starting a kid's hair salon and our friend Paul's going to run it." And I actually was not involved with the operations at the time. So we created this corporate chain of children's hair salons in the Toronto market, which really did become the place to get your kids' haircut. And then started expanding it across Canada, and then started growing with a combination of franchised and corporate locations. So when we acquired Blo and knew that or made the decision that we wanted to grow through franchising instead of through corporate development, we decided that we wanted to pick one of those paths. We didn't want to have this hybrid corporate and franchised situation because we felt it was too much of a conflict at the head office in terms of allocating head office resources. So with Blo, we picked that one path forward.
Okay, so my apologies. Yeah, I didn't realize you were kid space. There's such a huge difference between founding a business and acquiring a business. I'd love for you to share some of the challenges that you and your husband faced as you acquired Blo Blow Dry Bar as opposed to starting something from scratch.
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. I mean, I guess there are pros and cons on both sides of that equation. I think that when you acquire an existing brand, you have the advantage of knowing that it's already a proven concept and already having some systems and best practices in place. With the kids salon concept starting from scratch, we had identified that there was a niche in the market. There was nobody doing it well in the market, and we believed that we could come out with a strong brand, with a strong execution, and build the systems to do it better and really carve out that market share for us.
Okay. And then, so now you own the Blo Blow Dry Bar business. Is it a clean exit with the founders? Do you guys just take over? I'm kind of love to hear kind of the dynamic because our audience, we have a lot of emerging founders that are listening or watching the podcast, and they're also thinking about maybe becoming part of a platform and not sure what their role might be. Do I stay on board? They have passion for their business still, or they think that maybe there'll be a time and place for them to exit. So I'd love to kind of hear about that dynamic on how that transitioned for that founder and you guys taking over.
So initially, it was extremely important to us that they be a big part of the system. And the intention was that they would continue to be the brand experts. They would continue to evolve the brand, evolve the service mix, products, all of that. Over time, there did become a natural opportunity for them to exit. But I'll give you the example of the Lash Bar founders today. The team here at the Blo head office, we've become experts in the blow dry bar space. We're still learning to be experts in the lash space. So we needed to acquire that expertise with the founders that came on board. And then, of course, the advantage for the founders is that they've built their company to a natural place that they were able to achieve. They knew that they needed some external support to help take it to the next level. That was true with Blo, true with Lash Bar, true with Mink. So that's what we could bring to the table. We could bring the capital, we could bring the expertise and know-how, but the founders still wanted to be a part of that growth story and still benefit from it. So mutually beneficial. We need the founders to stay on to be that expert voice, that expert innovator, and continue to develop the brand. And then we bring our skill and expertise and resources to the table.
Well, besides having systems and processes in place, what would you say are some of the most important elements that get you excited about acquiring an emerging franchise company?
So, proven concept, like I said, we want to know that it has a number of stores open to demonstrate that there actually is demand for the service and positive customer reviews. You can see those on the digital review channels. And then happy franchisees. That was an important part of the due diligence process for us in acquiring Lash Bar. You want to make sure that even while a franchisee might recognize opportunity for improvement in particular key areas, you want to know that they're generally happy, that things are working well, that they're pleased with the results, that they feel good about their partners at the franchisor, corporate office, etc. So those are some of the key things that we would look for as well. You know, with our acquisition of Mink, they were not franchising when we found them. They were all corporately run. So there wasn't a franchisee franchise system in place. And quite honestly, that ended up proving to be a heavier lift for our head office team. Whereas at Lash Bar, they've already got a terrific system in place. We could come in and say, wow, this is awesome. In fact, we're going to use some of that now on the Lashkind side as we marry Lash Bar and Lashkind to essentially become one company. We're going to take the best of both worlds, and we can see all the gaps and the areas of opportunity where we can take components of the Blow system, some of our methods, some of our tools and resources, and kind of scratch out Blow and fill in Lash Bar, Lashkind, and now bring those resources and system approaches that we know are successful at Blow for the benefit of the franchisees in this new system.
Because as you quickly found out, it doesn't really matter what the product or service is. A lot of what we do in the back office is really rinse and repeat.
Totally. And that was the hypothesis going in. And that was why we said we want to find brands in spaces that are similar. You know, we understand what sorts of things a franchisee needs to do to motivate a stylist who's an artist, not a salesperson. How do you get them to sell memberships or sell retail? How do you get a franchisee who's not a hairstylist or a lash tech? How do you help them understand how the business needs to work and how they need to manage their teams? So there are a lot of parallels, even though the service might be a different offering.
Yeah, and I would also imagine when you're looking at a particular franchise or just a company to acquire, it's not just who you're purchasing it from. It's what does their team look like? How many people are on the team? How much of it is founder/president dependent? Because you're going to find out really quickly on how heavy of a lift that's going to be and how dependent it really was on that one person. Is this really a solopreneur business that you bought, or do they have a well-established team? Because I would imagine there's going to be folks that are going to come along for the ride. They're going to stay on board with you. And then there's going to be other people who, you know, for centralized service purposes, they may not be a need right there.
Yeah, absolutely. So you want to find those synergies. You don't want to have redundancy across the team because you've got to stay as lean as possible and lean as appropriate, recognizing that you've got to prepare for the growth to come. So yeah, part of the opportunity is assessing the resources that come with that franchisor team, assessing the capabilities, understanding what people are doing on the team. Are those roles that are easily filled on the Blow corporate team? One of the examples would be our team of franchise business coaches. We've got an incredible franchise business coach program that has really been a key contributor to driving unit economics, driving the success of the franchisees in our Blow system. We cap them at a certain number of locations per business coach because we don't want them not to be able to provide the excellent service to our franchisees. So if we're now taking on, in this case, the example would be the Lash Bar franchisees, do we have somebody that we need to add to the team? Is there somebody on the franchisor that we're acquiring who can be trained up to become a franchise business coach? So looking for those opportunities and assessing the capabilities that you're bringing and trying to be smart about building out the team to deliver that excellent service to the franchisees while being responsible to the budget.
Yeah. And there's also another element that I think that's interesting for a founder that may consider being part of, say, your platform, is that you're not typical private equity. And there is a great advantage to that. And your expertise in franchising, where most private equity, it is financially driven.
Yeah.
Not so much franchise experience driven.
Well, so it's interesting because we do have a private equity partner behind the scenes, and this gives me an opportunity to plug them. New Spring Capital, a big private equity shop with billions under management. At the beginning of 2020, we all know what happened that year. So right at the beginning of 2020, they launched a new investment strategy focused on franchising and multi-unit operations. We were actually their first deal in that space, and we did our deal at the beginning of 2021. And if founders want to talk about private equity and how you make that decision, I'm happy to share. It was a very difficult decision to make, and we were in the fortunate position of not needing external capital. We were a small group of friends and family investors. We had a very healthy balance sheet, But of course, 2020 proved to be a very challenging and difficult time. It was difficult to anticipate what was going to come next. So we decided it made sense to bring on board a private equity partner that would help us emerge from the pandemic and grow faster, stronger, bigger. And we figured we could do that better with this partner than without. But we chose our partner very carefully because the world is full of stories of unhappy relationships with PE firms where the PE partners are, like you say, very financially focused, don't necessarily understand the idiosyncrasies of the business, some of the nuances of running it. So we were very fortunate with the New Spring franchise partners that their strategy is to pair their investor or investee companies with two individuals, one of whom is more of that finance background person, and the other who has an operational background. So the person I speak to once a week, a gentleman named Pat Sagru, actually ran franchise systems. He ran Honey Baked Ham, he ran Salad Works. So when I'm talking to him, I'm not just talking to a PE partner who's interested in our financial metrics and KPIs. I'm talking to somebody who knows what it's like to run a franchise business. And even more importantly for me, they are very respectful of our team, of our corporate team, as well as of our franchisees. So they're there to support. They're not there to interfere with the strategy. And so when we were first talking to them and I was outlining my vision of where we were going to head emerging from the pandemic, how we were going to come out with much better systems and resources in place for our franchisees' benefit, I also outlined this vision of becoming a platform brand. And we were fortunate that because of all the steps we took and the smart things we did coming out of the pandemic, our company continued to grow and our franchisees continued to grow. And we found ourselves in the happy position of having unused capital on our balance sheet. And that was when we said, okay, we're ready to go forward and look for other brands. So for brands that are partnering with Blo Blow Dry Bar and looking to become part of our platform, this new family of brands that we're creating, they'll have the benefit of knowing that Blo is backed by a wonderful private equity partner who has a vision for our success, who will invest in our success, and who is respectful of our founders and doesn't want to interfere and muck about with what's already working.
Yeah, Vanessa, I had a very positive private equity experience myself a couple times. And, you know, when it comes to franchising, there are so many private equity firms involved now. So it's unfortunate because, you know, anybody that has a bad experience, that's what we're going to hear about for the most part, right? So that gets magnified, and those are the stories that we hear and, you know, we read about all the time, but it doesn't have to be that way. It certainly sounds like you really found an excellent partner that was able to have that balancing act and supporting and trusting your expertise and your team's expertise, and obviously the people they have in their own home, in their own office that have a franchising background. It's going to be really interesting to see over this next decade, I think, though, and this influx of private equity and what the long-term impact is going to be, especially on emerging franchisors that don't have a private equity partner, because you're kind of either with them or you're against them, right? You either have a private equity partner or you're a bootstrap founder and you're competing with a competitor who is a private equity backed company.
Yeah.
What do you
Yeah,
think?
that's a good point. I mean, look, we were self-funding for so long. I mean, we'd had the successful sale of the children's concept, and so we had capital to invest from that. Like I said, we were a small group of friends and family who were in the fortunate position of being able to make further investments in the company if and when needed. Not every emerging franchisor would have the same access to capital that we were fortunate to have. So bootstrapping the company is a reality for so many. And you know, you make an interesting point, because part of the thesis when New Spring invested in Blo was to provide the capital to enable us to make some investments. So we added a couple of head office positions, including our first ever vice president of franchise development. invested in technology. We invested further into franchise development, lead gen, advertising. So you're right, for franchisors that are happily going it alone, that is a legitimate path to success. It doesn't mean that just because your competitor has big backing of a PE firm behind them that they're necessarily going to preclude you from being successful. There's room in the market for many competitors in every segment. I really do believe that. It's a big world out there. So I think that as founders are thinking about how they want to expand, you've got to pick your partners carefully. You have to ensure that your vision is aligned with theirs. You have to be clear on your own personal goals about whether you're still there for the ride or whether you're looking for a near-term exit. For the companies that we have been speaking to about joining our platform, they have a different opportunity to consider, which is that by partnering with Blo, they're able to quickly acquire all the necessary expertise and systems to help them grow. That's a whole other consideration, because you could just take capital without that expertise or without that resource. So there's so many different ways to grow a company, but those are some of the things that if I were in the shoes of an emerging franchisor, I'd be considering. What am I looking for? What do I need to help grow? What's my near-term, long-term vision? And are my options aligning with that and supporting that?
Great points, because you really only get one shot at it too.
Yeah, probably. I mean, things change, people exit, people divest, things evolve, but it is a big decision to make. It was for us, it was a very tough decision, again, because we did have options. We weren't desperate. So it was a tough decision, but it's turned out to have been a good one.
Yeah, it becomes more of it's more than just a financial decision. It's an emotional decision as a founder.
Yeah.
I'm not somebody who usually takes very long to make a decision, and it took me about a year and a half, believe it or not. And I'm usually somebody that's willing to try something, and if it doesn't work, pivot and do something else. But it was the one decision that I really, really hemmed and hawed and thought a lot about. And it was the one decision, I've shared this before, it's the one decision that I brought home to my wife, and she said, ultimately, you're going to have to decide on this, because I can't influence you on this. You're going to have to live with whatever we decide with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my wife's always been a great supporter and always shared her opinion when I'd come home, and I'd share with her what's going well or not going well. And she was always great to lean on and always give me great feedback. But that was the one topic as a founder she wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole.
I get it, because you're living with the consequences of that decision for a long time. And I'm with you. I'm a quick decision maker. I don't think I've ever had such a difficult decision to make as being in that situation. My husband's my business partner. He was more clear cut about it. He could argue both sides of the options, but he wasn't as emotionally invested because he's not running the company day to day. So, like your wife, he sort of said to me at the end of the day, I'm good either way. You've got to decide. It was a tough decision to make.
Yeah, yeah. Especially when our spouses. I'm sorry, what was that?
Crystal ball would have been helpful.
It would have been very helpful for sure. Okay, there's a couple of franchise statistics that I love talking to experts such as yourself about. I'm curious to get your feedback. This one statistic that, 84% of all franchisors never get to 100 units. And I'm not caught up in the number of franchises that are sold. We all know it's all about becoming royalty sufficient and sustainability for the long haul. But 100 is the big number, since most franchisors never get there. What do you think? Why do you think most franchisors stall out and they don't even get close to 100 units? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I don't know the industry research, so I can only speak of my own experience observing the industry. I think it's a few things. I think it is, those who don't make it to revenue self-sufficiency, and what does that result in for them. I think there are those who maybe they've picked the wrong category, the wrong segment. Maybe they failed on the execution. Maybe they had early success and were able to scale to multiple units and then fall down on the execution. I think to grow a successful franchise brand, you really do need to be best in class, and that's a moving target, and we can never rest on our laurels. I think that there are oftentimes franchisors, maybe they started with successful corporate locations and then decided to grow through franchising, who fail to build the strong systems of support, and maybe you end up with unhappy franchisees. If you've got unhappy franchisees, you're not going to grow a franchise system because your candidates are going to reach out to them for validations, and if they're not hearing positive feedback, you're stuck. So I think those are some of the key reasons. I also wondered, as I reflected on this question, franchising is not easy in many ways. Franchisees they have a lot at stake. They're choosing to give up careers and become entrepreneurs sometimes. They're making investments that have significant financial impact on their families. They are not always showing up to their interactions with their franchisor in their best way. So for our team, we often have to deal with franchisees who are stressed, who are maybe behaving badly. We try to deal with that, but mostly we try to put up with it and know that it's not personal. But I do wonder if there's some people who just don't want to put up with that anymore. I wonder if that's a cause too of that.
I think that's very possible. I think the reason why most people franchise their concept, let's face it, is the founder is looking to expand their business. And when they expand their business through franchising, they quickly find out that franchise owners want to have a voice, and the founders or the CEO, the brand president, whoever it is that started that franchise, isn't typically accustomed to getting feedback or needing to get input from people.
Yeah.
And they grew their business. They forgot that franchising is really a two-way street. And I think that it is an expectation is one of the problems. And you have to quickly find out as a founder that you have one job, and that is to make your franchisees, help them become successful. That's it. You're no longer in the blow dry bar business or lash business or whatever. You are in the business of helping people be successful. And I think a lot of founders they're not prepared for that. And maybe they don't even have the skill set for that. They have the skill set to grow their business, which kind of leads me to something you said earlier. I think that philosophically, you and I think agree on something, because I heard you say it earlier. And that is, you chose not to have company-owned locations. I'm not against having company-owned locations at all. I think it's great to have a couple. I have a big problem with having a lot of corporate-owned locations and having a dual strategy. I think it's extremely difficult to have two sides of the house running. And I've seen a lot of people try it and fail. And I've seen it become a tearing of fabric of the culture when you have too many company-owned locations and franchisees, and the franchise owners are not sure who are you really rooting for, and are you really all in on franchising?
Yeah.
Are you and I on the same page sort of on that? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that, like you, I'm not opposed to having a small number of corporate locations. I think a lot of franchisors will use that model successfully for testing new things or making sure that they understand the business really well. The challenge is that you have to have the team set up for that. So from time to time, we have to step in and take back a location, as all franchisors do. And I have to be honest, we're not good at it, because we have people doing it sort of in between their to-do list items that are part of their real day job. We don't have a dedicated team available to run locations that we are now responsible for running. So I think if you're going to go the corporate location route, you do have to look out for that conflict of interest, or even a perceived conflict of interest. And you have to know that you've got the team to successfully manage it.
Yeah, we kind of did the same thing. Well, first off, we did also try to save a location and plug somebody in at least temporarily. And for us, there was one story where we had a franchise in Portland, Oregon that was actually a successful franchise owner, and we're in the Tampa Bay area, so all the way across the country. And this franchise owner was successful, but there was a lot of personal issues, and so he basically just was closing down. This is back in like 2009, and we took over. And it made it really challenging for us because we wanted to make sure the location was operating really well. So we put somebody in the business there to run it until we can eventually sell it. But about 10 years into us running our business overall, we decided we were going to start opening company-owned locations as a dual strategy, because we felt the only way we were opening locations was obviously our marketing efforts in a specific region of the country. And we saw that there were great markets that we just weren't getting an uptick of inquiries from, no matter how much we marketed directly in that area. And what happened for us, Vanessa, is that our revenues soared, but so did our expenses. We were hemorrhaging. Our net income on our company locations was struggling because we had to put so many people in place. And it was a lot of work, and more than a lot of work. I felt like it was, for us, I know a lot of people have done it well, it was a distraction for us in the home office. That's the truth.
That makes perfect sense to me. And I would say, the reason when we bought Blo Blow Dry Bar, the reason we said let's grow through franchising instead of corporate locations was partly because of our experience with the children's concept and feeling that conflict of interest, but also real capital constraints. To open bricks and mortar locations is expensive, and one of the advantages of scaling through franchising is that your capex is low. But I want to go back to something else you were talking about there, that notion that you exist as a franchisor to set your franchisees up for success. I shared with you that I joined our corporate office later along our journey. It was about 10 years ago. I think we were rounding up at the time to say we had about 40 locations. And when I got here, I had to learn franchising from scratch. I kind of knew it as an investor, but hadn't been an active investor the way my husband had been in growing our business in those days. So the thing that I realized early on was that we are in the customer service business, and our customer is our franchisee. And that is how we have oriented our team here ever since. And that is what I tell our candidates. All we do at Blo's head office all day, every day, is think about how can we do a better job of setting our franchisees up for success? What resources, what educational opportunities, what tweaks to our service mix or our pricing structure or what have you. It's a process of continual evolution, and it really stems from recognizing that the people who have chosen to partner with you have given you a great privilege and a great responsibility.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which kind of leads me to, I said there was two statistics that bothered me. And one of them was the 84% that don't get to 100 units. And the second one, which we've kind of answered, is the reason why in the world are there 400 new franchisors every year and 400 going out? Like, we're not getting anywhere as an industry. We sold the same number of franchisors for the 20 something years I've been involved. And I think it comes down to really what you said too. It's the expectation, who you putting first.
Yeah.
And that becomes a challenge for a lot of people. I don't think franchising is it's not what they expected when they go in.
Yeah, look, I think like you'd say about so many things, franchising isn't easy. If everything was so easy, lots of people would do it. And maybe lots of people jump into franchising and discover that maybe it isn't as easy as they thought, and maybe they aren't surrounding themselves with the people who have some expertise, and maybe they aren't attending the conferences and learning opportunities. I think also there's something else we haven't touched on that emerging franchisors need to think about, and that is the path of partnering with franchise sales organizations and brokers. And as an emerging franchisor, you can get scale quickly. You give up a lot of your economics because the franchise fee is by and large going to those third parties. And our industry is littered with the bodies of franchise systems that opened or sold, hundreds of locations, and then realized that they couldn't get them open and needed to refocus. Sometimes they're refocusing because they realize that they have this limited resource in their head office team, and they can't yet chew gum and walk at the same time.
Exactly.
And if they're not able to get these locations open, then you've got to stop selling. So I think a lot of franchisors just find themselves in that situation where maybe they've sold a lot, they've given away all the franchise fees to those third party sales outfits, and then find themselves in a situation where they're not able to generate the recurring revenue stream that they were counting on quickly enough.
Yeah. I hope I'm wrong, but I am concerned over the next decade that I'm in the middle of watching a horror movie, that there are way too many franchisors that have sold way too many locations and they're never getting them open.
Do you think that that has changed in the last few years, or do you think that
Yeah.
just what do you think
I,
has driven that?
I, I think I'm not blaming the franchise sales organizations or the broker groups because it's so easy to blame somebody else. At the end of the day, if I'm the founder, or if I'm the leader of my company, I'm the one hiring the FSO and the broker group for them to do business with me. And so I think this is a concerted effort of everybody. It's maybe it's a lot of people. It's founders that really shouldn't have franchised to begin with because they didn't have the capital that was really necessary for them to be successful. So what they did was they hired an FSO and a broker group to hopefully get them franchises quicker, but they really didn't have the capital then to support them. In other cases, it's franchisors that sold to a private equity group and feels the heat of having to open so many locations, and again, doesn't have the expertise and doesn't have the people and the horsepower to be able to support these locations. What I feel like I've seen in the last, I'm going to say last 5 years, 7 years, is just the amount of franchisors that are opening dozens and dozens of locations that are unopened. I
Mhm.
felt like in the early, I don't mean to sound like an old guy here, but I remember in the 2000s, like Quiznos was the big story.
Yes.
Quiznos was the poster child for how not to do it. But there weren't that many Quiznos out there. And I realize Quiznos is a bad example because they were so massive and selling a lot of locations and never opening them. But the story wasn't as common. And I feel like it's common with emerging franchisors that are so excited and they share with me how many locations they have. And then my follow-up question is, well, how many are open? And then I hear a number that's drastically lower. And I'm thinking, I'm not saying this publicly on the show, of course, and I would never embarrass somebody, but sometimes I hear a number and I'm thinking in my head, they're based on how many people they have on their team and where they're going, they're never getting there. And I think I could be totally wrong. And I know it's not black and white. We live in a gray world, so it's not everybody, but
Exceptions to every rule.
there are exceptions. I just feel like there is a fairly dramatic increase in emerging franchisors that have sold too many and are never going to open them.
Look, you have greater insight into the industry from that perspective as I do, so don't have perspective on whether there's more of them today or not. What I can tell you is that when I joined our company and started learning the industry and learned about this pattern of franchise systems that grow too quickly by selling and then not being able to open, it became very clear to me that our mantra needed to be grow responsibly. And for me, that's always been about ensuring that you've got that infrastructure, head office, the right number of people, the right people in the right positions, the right tools and resources for your franchisees. And again, balancing that with budget. So how do you prepare for the company you're about to become without going too far to build up a team that you can't afford or that your system can't responsibly sustain? How do you grow responsibly by not doing that thing that's so tempting? It's so exciting to be able to say, we sold 100 units this year. I mean,
Right.
I wish we could say that every year.
And having all those pins on the map and looking at the map and seeing all those locations, of course, it's exciting. I'm with you.
But when you look behind the curtain and you realize that that number is not just meaningless, that number is actually a negative.
Hmm.
Grow responsibly, I would say that it continues to be something we think very carefully. We're always challenging ourselves. Is it time to add that next position or that next person in that role? Is it time to make that investment in that technology? Or, you really have to plan very carefully. But I would say to all emerging franchisors out there, grow responsibly.
Yeah, I think this is why there's an increased opportunity for folks like you to be able to expand your platform because it offers an emerging founder to be able to come aboard with a team and help them grow as opposed to doing it on their own. And I know there's pros and cons to both, but I think it does bode well for what you're doing.
Yeah, and I'll just say one more thing, which is again picking up on something you said earlier, that sometimes the franchisor doesn't necessarily know what they don't know, especially if they're new to franchising. So I
Totally.
would really advocate for find mentors in the industry, attend those conferences and webinars, learn as much as you can. It's a wonderful industry in that people are very willing to share their information and experience. And make sure that you're surrounding yourself with the people who can fill the gaps in your own skill set. So the franchisors, the emerging franchisors who I think are going to be successful are the ones that set their ego aside. They can
Right.
be very proud of what they've built and what they've established, but they need to be honest about who they need to be or what their company needs to be, and to take them to the next level, and then be honest about where their own personal limitations lie and how they need to fill those gaps through their partnerships or hiring.
Cool. Where are we in terms of number of locations in the US and Canada for each one of these brands?
So has 120 locations, almost 100 of those are in the US and the balance in Canada. Lots of market opportunity still. So anyone listening who's interested in franchise opportunities, we have so many available territories still. It's exciting to know that there's so much growth ahead. Mink has the 4 corporate locations, and I'm proud to share that same son who inspired the children's hair salon concept when he had his first haircut is actually our franchisee of those 4 locations. He acquired 1 2 years ago when we were just getting started, and then acquired another 2, and then the 4th one by the end of his first year in business. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
We have 2 Lashkind locations, and we'll continue to add under that banner. Bar has 16 locations, of which 13 are open.
Okay. And what's the split between US and Canada locations?
For Lash Bar,
Well, Blow, because Blow's the
Low
largest
is
brand.
almost 100 in the US and the balance in Canada.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you did say that earlier. I missed that. What do you think is something a franchisor that's emerging needs to seriously consider before expanding internationally? Because again, that's another thing that's super exciting to think you're going to be a worldwide brand.
Yeah. Look, I think without sounding naive or silly, I think that if you're an American looking to expand into Canada or vice versa, I think you could probably manage both as long as you could afford all the things you need to do to create a new FDD and set up your infrastructure in the other country. I think when we've considered international expansion or embarked on international expansion in the past, we've gotten into trouble by going onesie twosie, a franchisee in Moscow, a franchisee in London. If you don't have the scale and support there, you're going to fail. So if you're going to go international, you want to go with either sales group or a franchisee that has the experience of building a brand in that market. But I also think you have to be very careful. It's so tempting to go international, and you'll have lots of groups knocking on your door and saying, we want to take you to the Middle East, or we want to take you to Asia, or whatever. The problem is, or the challenge is, when you go into net new markets, depending on the nature of your business, let's say you're a quick service restaurant brand, the infrastructure and distribution mechanism and all of that you're going to have to set up in a different country. I think with a service brand like ours, it's probably easier. But think about what the implications are for your head office team. You might not have the resources that you need to do this North American expansion and international expansion.
Sure. For a US based franchise, I have no issues with them expanding into Canada when they feel like they're ready. There's so many similarities. My issue with a franchisor expanding though beyond North America is, and founders, I want you to hear me loud and clear, that I don't think you should expand internationally because you got an inquiry from another country. That's not the reason why you choose, say, going into the UK. You go into, say, the UK because you want to go there and you're ready to go into the UK, not because, oh, I got a phone call from them and they're really interested. That's not the reason why strategically we expand our business.
Yeah, I think that's really wise advice. That's one of the mistakes we made early on. The locations in Manila, London, Moscow do not exist in our system any longer. And by the way, you've got to think about your IP protection. So if you think you want to go into a given market, you're going to have to spend a ton of money on protecting your IP. And then if you're not demonstrating use of that IP in that market, you're going to lose that protection. So that's something else to think about when you're considering international expansion.
Yeah, I do recommend though going ahead though with the trademark, to cover the European Union. I think it's like 28 countries that you get to cover.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, I had done that earlier on where I wanted to cover the EU. I covered Australia, of course, Canada, and a few other countries that were outside of the EU. But it felt like it made more sense to at least protect it. But
Yeah,
like you said, though, it's either use it or lose it also, right?
correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Glad we covered that because expanding internationally is just as exciting, or if not more so, for some people than it is just, opening nationwide, coast to coast here in the US, and people
Yeah,
get caught up in it.
you do get caught up in it. It looks like that shiny thing in the distance that you want to chase. But there's so much opportunity in the US, less so in Canada, quite frankly, which explains our 80-20 split. But there's lots of white space here. And I do think as we regrouped on that international strategy, sure, if the right partner comes along, we'll consider it. But for the time being, we've got plenty of opportunity to grow the company we want to grow here in the US and Canada.
Nice. All right. I want to go a different way here. I'd like to get your input, Vanessa, on what are some of the factors you think are really important for a founder when you think it's time for them to sell their company or maybe at least take some chips off the table because you've been on the other side of the fence.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of the things we've touched on. So recognizing where you're at in your company and understanding whether you don't have or do have what it takes to take the company to the next level. If you've identified that you're not the right person for that job, be clear on what your vision is. You're done and you're ready to move on to your next opportunity, or do you want to see this grow and participate in the growth? I think it's about understanding financially what you're looking for. I think it's about understanding, are you looking just for a partner that's going to bring the financial resources, or are you looking for somebody who's going to bring the expertise and help guide you? So, it could just be they're giving you money and you're going to go hire the right people, or are you bringing in a strategic partner who can really participate in building the company with you? So, yeah, I think it's about recognizing your own skill set, where you're at, what your vision is, and what your long-term commitment to the brand is.
Okay. And to protect the innocent here, I'm going to ask you though, when you look to expand the platform, what are some of the more common red flags that maybe you've seen with a brand that you maybe consider bringing on and you decided, nope, they didn't have what you were looking for? What are some of the most common issues?
I think it could be that that we're not confident in the proof of concept. And maybe that means that they're only one in their entire space and there are no other competitors to sort of build out a category. That would be a bit of a red flag for me, or certainly a yellow light, proceed with caution. Today, I think our company would be more inclined to partner with brands that have a bit of a system in place already, so that we're not creating a franchise system from scratch. So with founders who do get what franchising involves and have already put some of the pieces of the puzzle in place. And again, like I said, if you don't have satisfied franchisees who have confidence in and affection for their head office team, that would be red flags too.
Yes, I've enjoyed our time here together today. Can you just share with me if someone was interested in getting more information and maybe working with you, or interested in maybe becoming a franchise owner, how can they get a hold of you?
So our website is blowmedry.com, blomedry.com. You can access franchise.blowmedry.com as well. You can reach me at vanessa@blowcorporate.com, blocorporate.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Vanessa Yakobson with a Y. And we're excited to talk to you if you're looking to talk about expanding your emerging brand in partnership with us, or if you're looking to become a franchisee, whatever it is, we look forward to those conversations.
Awesome. All right. Last question. I have the franchise tip jar. I always end every podcast with it. Give me one piece of advice that you would give an aspiring franchisor or somebody who hasn't franchised their concept yet. What would be like one piece of advice you'd give them before they go ahead and franchise their business?
They remember that you are in the customer service business, but the customer that you're serving is your franchisee, and think about what that means and how you have to organize and orient your head office effort and resource around that notion.
Vanessa, thank you so much. I appreciate it. It was great meeting you, and thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much. We look forward to getting the link and we'll share it.
Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.